Welcome to Mysterious Universe, Season 31, Episode 2. Coming up on this show, we've got the UFO Supercharger Network, DNA frog lasers, and the Russian wave genetics of quantum holography. I'm your host, Benjamin Grundy. Joining me is Aaron Wright.
Whenever you add quantum to something, it just makes it far more legit.
You know that it's real.
That's right. Yeah, it's got to be real. It's got to be accurate.
You got a quantum glass of water over there, got a quantum cup of coffee.
It's just...
Everything's quantum on this show.
Yeah, exactly. So what's this quantum, what is it, a frog laser, duck laser?
I discovered there's a series of Russian scientists, and this is beginning in the 1930s, allegedly, that went in a different direction when the rest of the world was discovering the origin of genes and DNA and the double helix and, you know, the pairs,
biochemistry,
the nucleotide pairs and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
There were all these Russian scientists, especially during the Cold War, who were like, "Niet, it's all wrong. We find a new science." And they figured out how to capture DNA information with lasers and turn chickens into ducks by shooting lasers at them.
Surely that's complete pseudoscience.
That's
all impossible.
From the latest issue of Nexus magazine, one of the greatest, longest-running weirdo woo magazines in the history of the world. There's always good stuff in there.
They do good work. I know we've been at war with them every now and again, but they do good.
Yeah, we've had our run-ins with Nexus over the years, but who hasn't? Let's be honest. And this latest issue has an article on this Russian scientist who passed away just a few years ago, but he was actually nominated for a Nobel Prize. I'm going to be talking about his work coming up. Dr. What's his name? Garyaev. Garyaev.
Okay.
He was nominated for a Nobel Prize in medicine and physiology. I think it was back in 2008.
So am I correct in the assumption that if it's showing up in something like Nexus magazine that his research was suppressed and
it's
hidden?
It's freaking frog lasers,
well,
dude. What
yeah,
do you
okay.
expect?
Yeah, of course, it's suppressed and hidden. Yeah.
And he was nominated for the Nobel Prize, and then sadly, he passed away 3 weeks later.
Was he lasered by someone?
Well, that's all the conspiracies. If you look up this guy, there's all these conspiracies that he was killed because he was about to be nominated. He was about to possibly get the prize. And this would have put the spotlight on him, which would have exposed a lot of Russian secret DNA frog laser research.
Oh, I see. Okay, right. So it's not like pharmaceutical companies trying to knock him off. It would reveal other details, more dark world kind of stuff.
It would have opened up a whole can of worms, a whole Pandora's box of alternative DNA science. So I've got some weird stuff surrounding that coming up. We're going to look at the magic behind it. We're going to perhaps return to even S. Rob's latest. I was looking at S. Rob today. There's, S. Rob, the
balloon magic,
famous spell salesman. He's a sexy naked person, sex attraction, sexy spell is one of our favorites. 25 pounds. We'll link to it in the show notes if you want to get that spell.
Is it still available?
Still available. I had a look today. But he's got a video on YouTube where he's just coming out of a nightclub or something in the middle of the night with sunglasses on, like classic S. Rob. And his latest book is, I think it's called How to Summon Demons. Like
in a nightclub?
Yeah, something like that. But he comes out of this nightclub and he's like telling this story about how a demon serpent appeared to him. And then he starts rambling about the Wu-Tang Clan. So we've got to go into that. I saw that right at the end of the day, and I just thought, this is the icing on the MU cake that I'll be saving for dessert later on. What have you got coming?
Right, okay. Well, we were going to talk about this strange link between UFOs and mining on the last show. We didn't get time to do it, so I'm going to go into that in our Plus extension, but I've managed to extrapolate it a little bit and take a look at this great new documentary. Well, when I say new, it's been out for a couple of years now, but a great documentary looking at this correlation between power locations, so not just mines, but also power plants and significant installations across West Virginia that seem to have a higher incidence of paranormal activity, not just UFO activity, but paranormal activity in general.
You mentioned something about UFOs and mining activity on the last episode that we didn't get a chance to go into.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So it was pulling uranium, like there's stories of UFOs pulling the radioactivity from uranium and, kind of sourcing, energy and all that sort of stuff that they would need. Because if you're traveling from somewhere deep in the universe, you don't want to bring all your supplies with you. You want to go to the local, convenience store when you get to your destination. So it turns out that Earth's mines may be those locations. So I'm going to go into what could be considered to be the EV supercharger network.
Cool.
Across West Virginia that is for UFOs.
Is it just a massive queue, all these discs lined up?
And when it gets cold, they just freeze and crash.
3 of the chargers are broken.
Pretty much, and it's always the wrong connector, and you've got UFOs fighting, or occupants fighting each other. All that stuff comes up.
That sounds fun.
Yep. All right, so let's jump into this.
Yeah, so I went into, as I said, the Nexus latest issue. This is January 2024, volume 31, number 1. And there's an article in there by Roger Meacock called DNA as Wave Genetics. And I started reading this, and it's one of those conundrums where, you want to make fun of it, which I will. But at the same time, you start to wonder, is there anything to this? Is there a diamond in the rough here? Is there some true information? And it's all about the work of this Russian scientist. Again, his name's Professor Peter Garyaev. And I think I've got an image of him here. No, I don't. I just turned all my images upside down.
Just turn my map upside. There he is.
There he is. Handsome Russian-looking guy. And he was nominated for a Nobel Prize back in October of 2020, but sadly passed away just weeks later on November 17. So there are these rumors surrounding his death. I couldn't find out how he died or if there's anything nefarious. It's just people like to comment, just idiotic comments, to be honest. But I was reading this article wondering, what is this guy's area of expertise? Well, this author, Meacock, claims that Garyaev was best known for his discovery of the phantom DNA effect back in 1984. Have you ever heard of this?
No. Does this link in with epigenetics or something like that?
Yeah, kind of. He supposedly discovered that an electromagnetic trace of DNA is detectable in water after the DNA has been removed from the solution.
Oh, that's odd. Is it like a weird homeopathic DNA effect or something?
Well, critics of this are quick to apply that label, that this is simply homeopathy, which has been supposedly proven wrong, proven false, which, is a whole other topic. But in this article, he said the discoveries and theories that he developed into the practical treatment system known as wave genetics is the culmination of his understanding of quantum biophysics and clinical medicine. So in terms of this reference to homeopathy, I guess it's kind of the same principle, that there's something left behind.
There's an impression left behind.
A solution is diluted enough that this is the idea that there's some kind of imprint, there's some kind of memory.
Yeah.
And other researchers have gone down this track and have tried to argue that it's something magical about water, that water has a kind of memory effect. This isn't quite what Garyaev was onto. This wave genetics thing that he's started to build upon is a little bit different. Meacock gives us a bit of history here. So, of course, we know 1953, we've got Crick and Watson. They discover the double helix, the structure of DNA, the pairings of nucleotides. They win the Nobel Prize for this discovery. Then you've got Dr. Craig Venter, who led the International Human Genome Project that cost millions and millions of dollars, where they drafted the first sequence of the human genome. And I forget how long it took them. It was months and months and months.
Oh, it was longer than that, wasn't it?
Years, right?
It was only recently fully mapped, I think.
And today we can do it pretty much instantaneously.
Very
rapidly.
Yeah.
They concluded, though, that only 5% of our encoding triplets in the DNA are used to direct the functionality of it.
That's right.
Which is where the term junk DNA comes from. Now, that's not really a term that's used today, and the understanding has evolved. And I think the mainstream understanding of DNA is that it's not junk DNA.
Well, the reason why I think at some point some people speculated that early on that it may have been junk DNA is because a lot of it was theorized to be viral insertions.
Oh, right.
From viruses. And it's just been in our genome now for a long. It just doesn't do anything. It doesn't code for anything. But of course, there's been deeper research into it, which suggests that that's not necessarily the case.
Well, the bottom line was it revealed that there must be other factors to how DNA functions. If you've got 95% of this material that isn't doing what we think it should be doing, or we don't understand what it's doing, the picture is incomplete.
Well, it's also inconsistent with the theory of evolution as well. Like evolution, the whole idea is that you're evolving to get better. So you're discarding things that aren't required, right? So if we've got DNA and 95% of it is useless, it doesn't make from an evolutionary standpoint, why we would hang on to that for so long. It must have a purpose.
Yeah,
it must serve some role.
And naturally, that's what you would think, is there's a purpose for everything in the human body.
Yeah.
And this surely just wouldn't be junk. Well, Meacock makes it clear that Russian scientists from the get-go, their understanding of DNA and genes deviated from the West quite considerably. And he goes all the way back to 1925, where apparently scientists like Alexander Lubashev recognized that our DNA and genes are not the code for living organisms in themselves, but
so what is it?
Are the link to our bioinformational field.
Uh-oh.
Now, we've covered this kind of stuff before when we've looked at biophotons and the idea of a kind of energetic scaffolding.
That's right, yes, the electrical scaffolding.
Yeah, some kind of electromagnetic scaffolding that makes up the constitution of the physical body, and the physical matter, the cells and the bones and sinew and the muscle, its development follows the blueprint of this energetic scaffolding.
Which we then speculated might give us insight as to why people experience things like phantom limb syndrome.
That's right.
Because the electric scaffolding still says that you should have an arm, but you don't have one, so it still creates pain and there's phantom, feelings, sensations.
So if your arm gets amputated and it gets itchy, you're in a lot of trouble. You can't scratch it. And of course, neuroscientists will say, well, it's all in the brain. We've discovered this part of the brain, but there could be more to that. And these scientists believe this information resides and operates at the quantum level as waves and fields. So it's not the nucleotides, it's not necessarily in the DNA. That's just one part of it. That's the material part of it. But the bulk of the information exists as a field. Another Russian that came along shortly after this, who came to the same conclusion, was N. Beklemyshev. He worked on a similar idea of this bioinformational field. I can't find any information on these guys, by the way. This is my caveat on this information. These guys are not Googleable.
I wonder why.
Which is extremely suspicious. I would think that I would at least find some reference to them. Perhaps they're just so obscure that there's no writing in English about them at all.
That's a possibility. Or the other possibility is that it's just been made up.
Well, not that it's been made up. It's just that they were quacks in the 1920s as well, which is another possibility. So I'm open-minded to either direction. So Garyaev's team at the Russian Academy of Sciences, and this is where he was established during the Soviet Union and after as well, he put together this team to investigate DNA. And he recognized, based on the work of these earlier individuals, that it wasn't just a case of sequencing the nucleotides and the codons and looking at that physical matter. He took a broader approach, according to Meacock here in the article. In his team, he brought together biophysicists, molecular biologists, embryologists, but also linguistic experts. What? Why would you need linguists in your DNA research? They concluded that the supposed junk DNA that has been completely neglected and forgotten by Western mainstream science wasn't a redundant leftover of evolution at all. Linguistic studies revealed that the sequencing of the codons of the non-coding DNA follow the rules of grammatical syntax that gives context to the coding DNA.
Oh, hence why you need the linguists.
Right.
So I've heard this theory before as well, and this is something I've speculated on, is that rather than, if you're an ancient civilization or a highly advanced civilization and you want to record your history in something, you do it two ways. One is in stone, but that's not guaranteed to last a long time, or you put it in DNA.
How do you put it in DNA?
Because you could put you could put text into DNA.
How do ancient people do that?
Well, I'm saying like in a very advanced species that has created humanity. This is the theories that are out there.
You're talking about technology.
Yeah, that have created, like for example, they've created humanity. And so in our DNA, they've impregnated that knowledge so that you at some point will be able to read it. I'm not saying that that's what's happened. It's just one of these theories that's out there.
This is more along the lines of them finding similar rules to language, that the DNA information follows the same, like syntax is the rules of language, like the mathematical relationships between the words. They found the same thing. the team allegedly discovered that there is a definite structure and logic in the sequence of these triplets, creating a biological language such that the codons effectively form words and sentences, just like our spoken language follows grammatical rules. So it's, to put it in like a layman's nutshell, is that they unlocked some kind of secret language code of DNA, some kind of secret code. So
it just happens to be in Russian.
Yes, only in Russian.
Obviously, it's a mathematical formula.
That's right. Yeah. And his team, they concluded that DNA functions on an electromagnetic and acoustic level. And because of this discovery, it could be modulated. It could be reprogrammed using sound and frequency.
So hang on. Vibrations?
Vibrations, exactly. So this is where we get to perhaps his most famous experiment. And really, after reading this is why I wanted to talk about this guy today. So in one of these experiments...
Despite the fact he's a handsome gentleman, would you mind just taking it off the screen? He's just staring at me, freaking me out. You've just left it on the screen here. I just got this Russian dude staring at me.
I can't remove it from the screen. It's like... It's got a spell. He's got a Russian spell.
He's looking into my soul. It's freaking me out.
Well, listen to this guy's experiment. He got a laser. He got a low-powered laser, and he shone the laser through a container that had salamander embryos in it.
Okay.
And the laser went through these salamander embryos into another container that had frog embryos in there. And
so the laser intercepted the salamanders and then hit the frog embryos.
And you would think, okay, so what are these frog embryos going to grow into? What do you think they grew into?
Don't tell me salamanders.
They grew into frickin' salamanders. Here's the technical document of his research.
So is this, again, going back to that whole homeopathy idea, is he suggesting that with the laser somehow he could transfer the genetic information of the salamanders to the frogs?
Yeah, so the laser, the low-powered laser is picking up the genetic information, the information from the DNA in the salamander embryos. It's gathering it up.
It's picking up the vibrations and transferring those vibrations.
Well, not even I don't know if it needs to be called vibrations, whatever. The information. Picks up the information, it beams it into the frog embryos, and this is what came out. Little like weird froggo salamanders. And this was his face. He was like, he could not believe it.
That's why you left it on the screen for so long. Now I know what you did. It's even worse.
So if there's any truth to this, I thought, wow, this is incredible. This proved that not only does DNA have an informational aspect that determines its expression, but that it is possible to pick up and transfer this information using freaking lasers.
Yeah, but the mind begins to, wonder what could be occurring here. Is it a laser? Like, could you just take the salamander embryos and then give them a bit of a stir in the frog embryo solution and then take them out? Like, why is it a laser?
Well, why wouldn't it be half salamander, half frog?
Yeah, why was it? Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how that would work.
Can you do the reverse? Like, can you run it through a frog and make the salamander turn into a frog?
Well, and there's all those crazy, stories about the Russians attempting to create genetic Superman soldiers by creating human Z's,
yes,
right?
There is a lineage of this.
So it's like, is this what you could do? You could fire through a chimpanzee embryo into a human embryo?
What happens if you get a laser and fire it through a salamander, through a frog, through a chimpanzee, into a pregnant woman's belly? Could you get some kind of Soviet super army of freaks?
Yes. I was going to say yes.
So did he have any idea how this was working? What was his theory? Well, Garyaev postulated that the genome is multidimensional and exists in a chromosome continuum. Here's the issue. Like the gobbledygook goes to level 1000 with this stuff. He claimed that a stable wave that travels throughout the organism along the highly structured double helix DNA and it holds the genetic information as electromagnetic and acoustic holograms. So it's kind of
lost me at holograms.
It's kind of falling in line with what we've discussed regarding this field in the past. This electromagnetic scaffolding, this blueprint that all living creatures, all living beings have.
Well, you know what it ties in with as well? It ties in with like the ideas of traditional Chinese medicine where the thoughts and the stress factors of the father or the mother, can influence the genetic outcomes, like the health of a child later on. I'm like, well, even though it's not significant though, but if you're under a huge amount of stress and that's affecting, I'm using the word vibration, but the energy, like, can that cause some type of modification of the genome?
Well, I think we're starting to understand things like trauma are passed on
absolutely
through the genes as well.
Yep.
So I can't remember last time we spoke about that, whether there's some kind of physical explanation for that. Whether they've identified what the changes to the telomeres.
I believe that was epigenetics, and that because we remember the experiments where they were like terrifying mice and then seeing if the offspring would have the same fear response, and they did. And I think from what I recall, it had something to do with epigenetics.
Right.
So the switching on of genes. So I guess in the womb.
The difference is the Russians are saying, well, we understand there's a discovery of these, chemical, genetic factors, physical factors that are passed on, but there's also a field. There's also kind of wave of information that's passed on as well. But he wasn't finished with his frog lasers. Gareev performed another experiment. Laboratory rats were given a pancreatic toxin called alloxin, and this induced diabetes, a diabetic state in the test rats. And so 1/3 of these rats were the control group. They remained untreated. They died after 4 or 5 days, all dead. But just before dying, there was another group of treated rats that were exposed to DNA information captured from a healthy rat pup pancreas. Now, he's not clear on how they captured the information. I presume it's another laser. Or maybe they used a cassette recorder to record the sound fields of their healthy pancreas. But according to his study, over 90% of the treated rats survived. So remember, this is just beaming those test rats with some kind of
laser,
light information or acoustic information. He claims they regained their pancreatic function by day 10, including a third group of test rats that were 20 kilometers from the source of the matrix.
So how did they transfer that information?
Well, I'll get to that with a French scientist who was doing similar stuff not too long ago. But the idea is you can digitize the information and then just email it. You can just email it to the other lab. They can then turn it into an analog signal and apply it to the control group, or not the control group, but the group of rats. By this experiment, according to Meacock here, Dr. Gareev proved that information collected from correctly functioning organs can be used to direct unhealthy organs to repair and regain function. So obviously this has huge implications for health.
And the pharmaceutical industry as well.
Yeah, if there's any truth to this at all. I grabbed a clip of the guy giving a lecture a few years ago. Now, forgive the translation. It's like a robotic machine translation. But we'll get a chance to see the guy explaining some of this. Let's take a listen.
I tried to convince scientists that the genetic apparatus works not only at the material level, but also at the wave level.
Oh, sorry.
They laughed at me when I offered them to make a DNA laser. All chromosomes of all living things are structures that emit laser light. There was a question, is it possible to create an artificial DNA laser? I convinced our scientists for about 5 years to make a DNA laser. We pumped up DNA and chromosomes so that they began to emit coherent light. Pumped with a yellow line,
well, that might be the biophoton effect, which we've spoken about in the past. And that's understood, that all living cells give off light to varying degrees.
Highlight was obtained at about 390 nanometers, blue ultraviolet light. It was published but went unnoticed.
Oh, so it's not in the
6 years
visible
later,
spectrum
a
either.
work by Japanese authors appeared, where they did the same work, and stated that they had created a DNA laser. Thus our work was confirmed. We have created equipment that simulates holographic processes. Next slide. This is the setup. This laser, which mimics chromosomal radiation, works on polarized photons. The polarization of a photon is a change in spin. Genetic wave information is recorded on the spins of photons. This modest setting allowed us to transmit genetic information read from the pancreas and transmit it over a distance of 20 kilometers in animals that did not have a pancreas. They were poisoned with a special poison that kills the pancreas, and the animals died from type 1 diabetes.
So that's the experiment I was just explaining.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just funny hearing this guy.
He's very matter of fact. I mean, obviously it's a translation. Looking at him.
It took him like 5 years to convince them to let him build a DNA laser. He's just showing up at the office every day. Trust me, it'd work. I get crystal, I get laser, I get DNA, shoot at rat.
It's good though from the perspective of looking at this at a completely different angle. Like a completely different angle.
Yeah, and immediately I realized, okay, if this has been done in Russia for a while, there's going to be Russian devices that you can buy that
on
do
Etsy.
This to you. And indeed, before I go into those, because I did find some Russian devices, there's one on the screen there.
Is that like a jerry-rigged laser of some kind?
That's your classic Russian DNA duck laser lab. That's what they all pretty much look like. And for those listening to the audio, it's a mess. It looks like a junkyard. But devices like this.
It looks like a copper cone sitting upon some other metal box of some kind with a switch on it.
Looks like a headphone amp with a weird pyramid on top of it. Before I go into these healing devices based on this discovery, I wanted to see if there's really any reality to this. Have any other scientists in other parts of the world made similar discoveries that back up this guy's claims? Surely he's not the only person that has come across this effect. Well, obviously everything about this guy is in Russian. It was very difficult to find information, but there have been other claims, and the author of the Nexus article, Meacock, mentions one of them, and that's Luc Montagnier.
Oh, yes. Yeah, he's the discoverer of the HIV virus, isn't he?
That's right. He won the Nobel Prize back in 2008. He was the co-discoverer, or he was the co-receiver of the prize. I think he discovered the virus on his own.
He's quite a controversial figure now, and I think he even came out and suggested later on that the HIV virus may not necessarily be the cause of AIDS, but like a
I wasn't aware of that.
There's something like that came out. He's also been heavily involved in the criticism of the vaccine rollouts with COVID. Rightly so. Yeah, it's quite intriguing where he sits.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
sadly, he died.
French virologist. He passed away in 2022. Won the Nobel Prize in 2008, but discovered HIV in 1983. That's what he won the prize for. So obviously a brilliant scientist, but you're right, he was highly criticized towards the end of his career for comments, especially towards the end for comments he made about vaccines. But most notably, he was accused of having Nobel disease or Nobelitis.
And what is that? That you've got too big for your
This is this slanderous term that's given to scientists who win the Nobel Prize, then have the audacity to research areas of science that are outside the mainstream understanding. How dare they? How dare they? It's unsound ideas, looking at unsound ideas. Have you ever heard anything so ridiculous?
Absurd. Absolutely absurd.
Like every scientific discovery has been thought to be ridiculous, before it was understood. So he was considered a sufferer of this Nobelitis because he made discoveries that seemed to perhaps support homeopathy. Although I'm not sure he ever stated that he supported homeopathy. It seems as though this was just a label that was applied to him.
Oh, that's the thing today. Like so many people just say you're this or you're that, and they have no idea about what your research is and what you're doing or your beliefs are.
It seems like it was a tool that his critics used to just slander him, to say he supports homeopathy. There's a hit piece I found from Joe Schwartz that was written about him back in February 2022 after he passed away. It was from McGill University. It was entitled DNA Teleportation. Really? Montagnier, in his curious paper, the author said, claimed that he had detected electromagnetic signals in water that had previously held viral DNA, even after the DNA had been filtered and the water repeatedly diluted. The signals were recorded by a microphone coil and sent by email to a group of researchers in Italy, where it was transmitted to a sample of distilled water in a sealed metal tube.
Wow.
So that's the setup for the experiment. And there's a documentary I'll link to in the show notes detailing this. It's a French documentary with English dubbing. It's over an hour and a half long. And this is really how they did it. Like when they distilled the DNA, like there was one molecule of DNA in a test tube, and then they distill that. I think they distill it like 20 times or something, more than 20 times.
By distill, you mean they heat it up so it turns into a gas, turns into steam, and then it's condensed. Like that's one of the way to make pure water, essentially.
Yeah, well,
it's a real purification process.
The stat they were quoting is that by the time they had finished diluting it.
Oh, diluting, okay.
It would be the equivalent of a drop of something in the Atlantic Ocean.
Right, okay.
That's how diluted it was. And the idea is that obviously there's nothing of that molecule left, but somehow there's a recording of it in the water.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to work out, whether or not it was distilling or diluting. Because if you're distilling it,
Did I say distilling?
Yeah, so distilling is you're turning it into steam.
Sorry, I meant diluting.
Diluting, yeah. So diluting, you still have the original water, but you've diluted it so much that, yeah, you've eradicated the original, but something still remains. So obviously that's how that electromagnetic signature can remain.
It's the distilled water that signal is injected into at the other lab in Italy. That's where the distilled water comes into.
Oh,
you must have misheard.
Yeah.
So
that's even more complicated.
So they take that distilled water that has that digital signal passed into it. They put it in the PCR machine. And I think it was on the third or fourth spin in the PCR machine.
That early.
It started to,
in the cycle.
It started to do the DNA replication. And the result was identical to the original that had been diluted.
Diluted, yeah.
Dilated. Not that kind of experiment. It was diluted in France. It had somehow.
Oh my God. So there's no way at all. There's no way. There's no physical connection between those two samples. So how was it transmitted? It was transmitted electronically.
The thrust of their theory was that water has a kind of memory effect. And of course, we have Emoto's research and others who have looked at this.
Who was the plant guy? Was it Hashimoto as well? He also looked into water.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of renegade scientists who have been thinking along these lines. And what connects them all together is they're slandered and attacked. And in this article, it said the scientific establishment was stunned. Here was a Nobel Prize winner making a totally implausible claim. Needless to say, nobody has been able to duplicate the experiment. And throughout the rest of this, he just starts attacking the guy, saying that he had all these other crazy ideas, like people that change their diets, it would be helpful for HIV. He started to oppose childhood vaccinations as if, this was imagine that, opposing childhood vaccinations. What an evil individual. This prompted more than 100 members of the French Academies of Science and Medicine to publish an open letter condemning the man.
Sheep.
For spreading dangerous health messages outside of his field of knowledge. He wasn't an expert. And of course, when COVID-19 appeared, Montaigne told French TV viewers that vaccination was an enormous mistake and would promote the spread of new variants. And the author here says, it seems the COVID virus exacerbates the symptoms of Nobel disease. What a douche.
Oh, this guy's going to die of cringe.
What a douche. So in terms of replicating this experiment, why would anyone try and replicate this experiment?
And subject themselves to the same level of ridicule.
Oh, let me just go ahead and destroy my career. If you replicated it, the only acceptable result is that you could not replicate it. It
fails, yeah.
And it's quite obvious that the bias is, heavily handed here, and the scientists that go against the grain, they really don't stand a chance. Like this guy's career and reputation was ruined because he dared to suggest something outside of conventional understanding.
And yet you've got the Russians doing this decades prior.
Yeah, so the Russians
allegedly
looking into this since the 1930s. Well, I wanted to play you a little clip from this French documentary that detailed his work, and it also includes some audio of his predecessor, whose name I was trying to remember earlier, who we have mentioned on the show. That's Ben Veniste.
Oh, yes.
Professor Ben Veniste, or Benavist. Let me cue it up here. And again, I'll link to this in the show notes. It's quite a long one. Let's take a listen.
I like him. You can just tell he's actually quite down to earth for a Nobel Prize winner.
Well, yeah, he's correct in saying that once he had that prize, it enabled him to do this kind of research and give a bit of weight behind it, because he wasn't just some random, he wasn't just an unknown name who was easily brushed aside. But of course, in the end, though, it didn't matter. He was brushed aside. He was attacked. His career and reputation destroyed. And this has resulted in some, humorous interpretations of this kind of research. So when I went looking for this Russian guy, Garyaev's genetic wave memory on YouTube, one of the videos that was near the top results was actually a TEDx presentation by Blair Reeve, Dr. Articulator. And I thought, oh, okay, well, there's a TEDx that you occasionally see some good stuff. So I'll have a listen to this and see what it's about. Let's take a listen.
Linguistic Wave Genetics by Dr. Articulator. I'm going to but forget that for now. Linguistic Wave Genetics by Dr. Articulator.
He calls himself Dr. Articulator.
On 8 straight monster 8 linguistic waves a wave of a vein and gentic internicket jintin energetic genetics. For which I'll invoice you latest by pay to this latent placed in your payment memo lemon lubscub on unconscious subconscious.
This is science humor. This gets the gags at the science conferences.
I don't hear anyone laughing.
When I demonstrate that linguistic wave genetics can be a means of healing certain plautably operatic or niglopробlative distraught chakras in your instructional thinking adapats and tatapatata patterns, you will think it completes.
Now, the humor comes from the fact that they do use terms like holographic and quantum. And
I heard chakra in there somewhere.
And chakra. Yeah, it's funny. I don't mind making fun of some of these guys. Obviously, we do it on the show, and I'm going to make fun of this Russian guy pretty soon. But
what's this guy making claims about? Why is he doing a TED Talk?
That all of this is just gobbledygook nonsense. And again, I'm just trying to paint the picture of the response that you will get from the club, the in-club.
But I'm just trying to get my head around it. This guy got up and spoke like David Wynn Miller for what, 45 minutes?
Yeah.
It's gobbledygook?
Yeah. I don't know if it was 45 minutes. It was probably about 5 minutes.
Expecting to achieve what?
Well, Garyaev ignored the naysayers and he continued with his own approach, which leads us to his most profound discovery yet. He proved that genetic data and information held on the quantum level can be captured, transferred and influenced using electromagnetic and acoustic waves. His next step was to realize that a photograph not only captures our physical image, but is also a means to link back to the universal hologram node that holds our DNA information at the time the photo was taken.
So those ancient African tribes that believed every time your photograph was taken, a piece of your soul is stolen, soul stolen is true?
I literally read that today. Someone arguing that the Australian Aboriginals were correct in thinking that if you get your photo taken, part of your soul is stolen. Well, this Russian scientist was saying, yeah, your photograph has like some kind of capture of your genetic information. By scanning a photograph, he believed, and they tested this and they did many experiments on this, and recording the reflections from the photograph, this DNA information can be captured and a digital signal can be created and turned into a WAV file or an MP3. You can get a sound file from your photograph.
So what does it capture? Does it capture your entire genome? Does it capture like a certain segment of your DNA?
Yeah,
a couple of chromosomes?
I'm not sure exactly what it captures, but it is genetic information. So the idea was, and I've seen this advertised, and this is where, real deserved criticism comes in. I've seen this advertised on various websites. You take a photo of yourself as a child, and then you send it into these places that sell these devices, like wavegenetics.co.uk, for example, and they will use their laser technology to scan the genetic information of you when you were a healthy baby, create a file, and they send that back to you. You then listen to that file every day, like before you go to bed, and your aging starts to slow down, according to them. So what I did is I went to their website. I went to wavegenetics.co.uk, the ultimate biohack for health and anti-aging. And I was checking out their site. There's a buy it now link. So let's just skip all the information, just go straight to the shop.
How much is it?
Let's scroll down. Yes, please help me restore my DNA information to transform and rejuvenate my health. Click here. I choose to be my best. Take me to the online store to buy. So I clicked on that. All right. Yeah, well, there's a lot of information. Just take me to the store. Where can I buy it? Okay. Individual matrix. Let's go. Let's click on that. Come on. Okay. Individual matrix with photograph, £800. This is a bespoke, personalized wave genetics matrix formula created for an individual human or animal.
So just out of interest, right? I mean, I get it might take a little bit of time to create it, but you're not really using any, lab material or anything like that. How does it cost £800? How do they justify £800?
Well, they had to pay for the DNA duck laser, so I imagine that's expensive. And so what I did is I purchased it using the company credit card. Don't worry, it's claimable. It's claimable on tax. And I sent them a photo of you when you were a baby, which is this one here.
That is not me when I was a baby.
Yeah, that's you. Does it look familiar?
No, it
Does anyone know who that is?
that better not be Hitler.
Yeah, it's baby Hitler.
Oh my God.
I sent him that. I sent him baby Hitler. And there's a sound file coming to you very shortly.
Oh, I know what the sound file is going to be.
No, it takes 6 months to get here. So we'll do a follow-up show in 6 months.
It's just going to be our soundboard, isn't it? It's going to be our soundboard. That's all it's going to be.
So that's the kind of stuff we're dealing with where, yeah, obviously you got to be highly skeptical and critical of this. These guys claim you can scan a photo, pick up genetic information from it, and replicate it, reproduce it.
But even the idea of how you would absorb that, like the idea that you just put on headphones and you listen to this, it kind of crosses over into that realm of like the digital drugs and that kind of stuff.
Well, now we're in the realm of magic.
Absolutely.
Where like the idea of something being imprinted on a photograph is never really something that we'd discuss in relation to technology or, a laser or a device.
You do in metaphysics.
It's certainly something that we would entertain. The idea that an artist, for example, can paint something, and there's more than just paint on canvas. There's something behind it. There's a piece of the artist in there. There's the message they wanted to convey. And this might be more than something just kind of construed by the viewer. It's more than just a subjective interpretation. There's a real intangible
energy in it.
Essence or energy of information contained in that.
Yep.
So the idea that a photograph can have something similar, I don't think is out of the ordinary. I don't think there's anything too crazy about that.
It's funny, actually. I've noticed it only recently. It's like, and maybe like people, it's just a trend. It's like, I don't think so. It's like every single woke corporation uses that same cartoon.
Oh, that artwork.
That really weird artwork.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, there's something in that. There's something in that energy. And I know it sounds batshit crazy, but like every single one of them does it because it's like there's an energy in the ideology behind it.
Do people know what we're talking about? It's like that generic
and it's everyone's using it.
Big tech art.
Yeah. It's just, and it's all kind of very, I don't know, it's like geometric a little bit, but it's very simplistic but it's everywhere.
Generic company art.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Generic tech company art, that style. You see it all over the place. I think it's fading out a bit now, but you still see it.
Oh, it's still around.
And it is, that's why that there's on the screen here, there's like a parody of it where it's the devouring, that famous devouring.
Yeah, I think there's something in these things.
Saturn devouring your sun in that style of artwork. And there is something off-putting about, because it's always, the thing about that artwork is it's always askew. It's always distorting reality.
Yes.
The proportions are wrong.
Yep.
The features are wrong and ugly.
The demographics are wrong.
Everything about it is like the nature of that is evil because it's shifting away from beauty and it's shifting away from truth. It's creating something distorted and unreal.
There was a quote that I saw the other day. I can't remember who said it, but I found it quite intriguing. There was, I don't know.
That quote from Kant.
It was Immanuel Kant. It was like the whole idea of like that there is truth in beauty, or beauty is like only truth is beautiful, something like that. But it's true. It's like you see beautiful art, and it's because it's truthful. When you start, stepping away from that, then it becomes like Hieronymus Bosch kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so what you're saying is that there's something energetic behind
in
that generic tech artwork that is
and contagious and negative,
uncanny valley, divergent. It's like it's degenerate.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying, and I tend to agree with you. But this whole idea that you can scan your baby photo,
that's complete absurdity. Like
it sounds insane,
and it's exploiting also people, that aren't aging, like happily. So you'll spend $800. You spend, $500 on a cream, or then you'll spend $800 to, get a laser.
Well, there's a lot of positive testimonials of people that have tried this.
Oh, yeah,
but amongst the positive testimonials, there's a few from like one guy I read said, my grandmother spent all her money to buy this because she had cancer and did absolutely nothing for her.
Awful. Exploiting people that are desperate.
But that's not to say it doesn't work. I mean, because it doesn't work for someone doesn't mean that there's nothing to it. But what if you don't have a baby photo? What if you're not as lucky as you to have a delightful baby photo to send into one of these services?
So if you start, let's just say that audio track comes back. Let's just play this out. We send in that photograph. We've paid £800 out of our hard-earned money that we've got to claim against our tax. And then all of a sudden I start listening to what? Like Erica?
Erica.
Like, and all of it, am I going to suddenly want to start rounding people up? Like, what happens?
I don't know. You're already a snappy dresser.
Do I grow a little mustache? What happens? It's terrifying.
Well, those who don't have access to a healthy baby photo can utilize one of a close blood relative, where the resonant frequency of the DNA acoustic hologram is sufficiently close to be able to influence theirs. This technique can also be used for helping those with congenital disorders such as Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, cystic fibrosis, etc., where a sibling or parent without the disorder can substitute their photo to create a sound file. And of course, as suggested there, yes, wave genetics can indeed cure Down syndrome. Let's take a listen.
Oh, no.
A tremendous result was achieved with the Down syndrome patient. The Russian academician Dr. Peter Gerayev and Dr. Nadezhda Ustinova, using their unique technology and expertise, achieved a tremendous result in the treatment of a patient with Down syndrome. They managed to create a unique way in which a change of negative influence of additional X chromosome in Down syndrome is achieved by use of linguistic wave genetics technology. The experiment involved a positive results were achieved with the 2.5-year-old child Roman Khitaryan from the city of Ekaterinburg. The brain of the child grows within the first 3 years. Roman's mother.
I'm being a bit unfair because it wasn't cured, obviously, but the results were the child started walking and communicating.
Had better outcomes.
And much better outcomes. But there's no control group. There's nothing to compare it to. So it's not like the parent had another Down syndrome child to compare the development to.
Yeah.
It's just the kid started to develop.
Are they describing the deletion of a chromosome? Is that what
No, just that the kid improved.
Right. But I mean, you got to wonder, like, we know how powerful the placebo effect is as well. Like, does the placebo effect have, even though the child's only 2.5, but did that play a role?
Well, there's a placebo effect for the mother.
Well,
I don't know about the child.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? With this kind of stuff as well, is that it comes down to, like, there's like a caregiver's questionnaire that they use in clinical trials, that kind of stuff. And sometimes, like, it is, open to a placebo in the case of the observer. Like, no, they're starting to look better. They're starting to be better.
Well, what this made me think of
hope.
is, could you do the reverse? Could you laser scan a photo of someone with a disability or someone on the way out?
I'm sure the Soviets experimented in that.
And then beam it into someone healthy?
Well,
what would that do?
Could you distribute it en masse?
Yeah. Could you have some kind of harp-like device pulsing out idiocracy on some kind of idiocracy wavelength, making everyone stupid
and it got turned on right before the pandemic.
Like, what happens if you scan a photo of a woman and beam it into a man? Like someone in government, for example. Like, what would happen? Imagine if your enemies discovered a way to beam some kind of energy into the minds of your leaders to create those kinds of results. what kind of world would we be living in, Aaron?
Clown world. We would be living in clown world. That's what we would be.
Well, what's funny about this is I was finding all these ridiculous examples and
Get that off the screen.
it's not on the screen.
Bring back the Russian guy.
It's not on the screen. I was finding all these ridiculous examples, but then I realized that there's other scientists outside of the Western sphere of influence who have come
North
to
Korean scientists.
Well, yeah, you're pretty close. Like one example was Dr. Chang Kan-jen. Here he is on the screen here. This guy's
What is he holding?
He's holding like an embryo of a chicken, I think, or is it a ducken? Is it some kind of?
Are they going to somehow create turduckens that just get grown from the embryo?
You're close. So this guy's story, incredible. He was born in Chengdu in Liaoning province in China back in 1933. He graduated from the Chinese University of Medicine in 1959. And parallel with his medical studies, he researched cybernetics, quantum mechanics, and radio engineering. He worked on psychic research. He worked on biomicrowaves as well, which is what this Russian research is. And there's very little information on this guy. It is impossible to look up information on this guy, especially in English. But there is one article that he wrote that's been translated into English.
And
where is it? But our beloved Nexus magazine.
that looks like an old edition of Nexus magazine.
Going way back to January 1996, Nexus Volume 3, Number 1. And who has a copy of Nexus Volume 3, Number 1? You do. Aaron bought the entire back catalogue a couple of years ago. So, yeah, we had this on our servers. So I pulled it up and I found the article from this guy, from Chang Kan-jen. And he writes that advances in modern physics have led me to assume that DNA is, in fact, only a cassette with recorded information, whose actual material carriers are bio-electromagnetic signals. Again, this is the same conclusion that the Russians came to. In other words, the electromagnetic field and DNA together make up combined genetic material, which exists in two forms. There is a passive DNA form and an active form. The active form is the bio-electromagnetic form. The passive form preserves the genetic code, whereas the active form is transmitting and it can be modified. So he talks about these laboratory experiments he did in China and Russia that he says have yielded positive results in the field transmission of genetic information. So again, this is the same kind of thing. This is what we've been talking about with the Russians, this idea of gathering the information and transmitting it, sending it somewhere else to see the effect. He's worked in agriculture, medicine, and other fields of genetics. And in the article, he lists some of his experiments and his results. So the number one thing he did was looking at the bioelectromagnetic effect on wheat mass and maize kernels, corn kernels. He said, in place of the cob heads, there formed original ears with grains like those of both wheat and maize. The maize was found to be superior to a reference lot by 200% in kernel yield and 300% in mass.
This reminds me of the electroculture, like the electroagriculture with the towers that were in Ireland.
Yes, and we did that recently with the Celtic towers.
Yeah.
We came to the conclusion that perhaps the seeds for the crop were placed there to kind of charge them up with some kind of electromagnetic energy. And of course, previous research we've looked at on the show has postulated that this is what ancient pyramid sites and mounds were used for because of their electromagnetic properties, either of the site itself where a particular structure or pyramid or mound was built, or the fact that the pyramid or the mound or the whatever man-made structure seemed to amplify those natural energies and would produce
better outcomes,
an increased yield.
Yeah.
The idea was that they would put their seeds there, they would put the seeds for the crop, and they would get a better crop yield. And this was, part of what these...
Significantly better too, wasn't it?
Yeah, this is part of what these structures were for. So he kind of tried to reproduce this effect. He looked at melons. There's photos I don't have for the show,
of
but
giant melons.
There's photos of giant melons he was growing. And he did experiments on the taste and all that sort of stuff. But he also did peanuts, sunflower sprouts. He took the DNA or the genetic information of peanuts and he applied it to sunflower seeds. Now, he claims that the the sunflowers changed shape to look like the peanut plants, and they also started to taste like peanuts. They had a peanut
That's
taste.
a considerable amount of genetic information, though, that he must be transferring.
Well, you can do anything if you've got lasers. And his most famous experiment is where he took 480 chicks hatched from 500 eggs and took one of his lasers, applied a duck's bio-electromagnetic field to the laser, and then blasted all these baby chickens with it. What he discovered was the chickens, as they grew up, they had webbed feet like ducks. They had a flat-shaped head and beak like a duck. Their necks were 70% longer, and the midsection opening of their eyes was similar to ducks in 90% of these chickens as they developed. So you're just seeing really bizarre stuff, but this is exactly the same research that was being conducted in Russia.
But this is around the same time, am I correct?
This is 1950s China, in the Academy of Sciences in China. That's one of the birds on the screen there.
I mean, it's subtle, but you can see that, yeah, there's some webbing going on there.
And the reverse also worked. He started to breed ducks with chicken claws by using lasers on the duck eggs. Isn't this bizarre? So what happened to this guy? Well,
Did he disappear?
look, he started to, well, one of the other ones he did was he got the bio-electromagnetic field of a goat and he started shooting it at rabbits. And he claims that the rabbits developed large curved teeth like the goats. So at least there was some kind of change in the organism. Now, he said, as a doctor, I'm particularly interested in the effect of the electromagnetic field of young organisms on older ones. The initial experiments were staged on old mice. He said they were exposed to the bio-electromagnetic radiation of young plant sprouts and animal embryos. He claims the results were the restoration of the sexual and reproductive functions in 31% of the mice. They extended the lifespan by 1.5 years compared to the control group in the mice. And there was an improvement in appetite, reaction speed, mobility in up to 68% of the mice that received this kind of laser field from younger embryos.
It makes you wonder as well, because it's obviously far less invasive than what, there's these, Silicon Valley big tech billionaires that are taking young blood transfusions. I'm like, well, is it actually working? But it's not about the components of the blood. It's about the electro elements.
You don't even need a blood boy. You just need a picture of a blood boy. And
Well, maybe you need them to be close to you and the beam has to be fired through them. And then you have to be like that scene out of Batman Forever where you've got like all the beams coming down into the Riddler's head. You're kind of sitting there getting the same effect going.
Right. So you line up 10 blood boys.
Yeah.
Right. Make sure they're nude. That's really important.
Yeah, you just get 10 Abercrombie and Fitch models
That's
before they went woke and then fire a laser beam through them and you stand at the end.
Yeah, you stand behind them and you're just like, oh! And it's like, you just start de-aging.
That's right. Yeah, it's like the reverse Indiana Jones scene.
Yeah.
You're a baby on the floor by then.
Overdo it and you're Benjamin Buttoned. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. This is real, legit Chinese, Soviet, communist science from the 1950s.
Yeah, that works.
So what do you do? Like, you've mastered creating duckins, you've created weird goat chickens and all sorts of horrific acts against God.
The PLA gets involved.
Yeah, what do you do? In 1987, he said he had an epiphany. He decided to perform the experiments on himself and jump in front of the laser. So he basically took the energy signatures from young organisms and beamed himself. Now, the guy's still alive today, and he must be. He was born in 1930. No, he can't be alive today if he was born in 1933.
Oh, he could be, but he's pushing, what, 90, 91?
100 years old. So after this, he was happy with how the results turned out with himself, so he put his old man in front of a laser. he got his father, who was 80 years old.
And what, did he use a bunch of ducks?
He blasted him with the genetic information of 20-year-olds. He claims that his father had chronic health conditions that disappeared. He had some kind of weird allergic itch he had had for over a decade that vanished. He had tinnitus, which diminished, and he had a benign tumor, which basically shrunk and disappeared. And hair grew on his bald spots 6 months later. His grey hair turned black, and a new tooth appeared in the place of one that had fallen out 20 years earlier. Come on, this is like a gold mine waiting to be tapped.
Again, though, you know what feels wrong about this is that, are you taking something from those 20-year-olds?
I just thought of that earlier because there has to be an energy exchange.
Yeah, there's an energy, because energy isn't created or destroyed, it's only transformed.
So again, maybe the Aboriginals were correct. Like they intuitively understood that if your photo is taken, in the future, some deranged communist scientist could shoot a laser at it and steal your energy.
Your essence. Well, what do you think about like non-local, activity, spooky action at a distance, that kind of stuff? Could you actually, I mean, we're getting metaphysical now, but could you actually steal someone's essence, their youthful essence, from a photograph?
I think you probably could, based on all this legit information I've been
hang up a
covering.
few magazines of Vogue or some old bag that's like firing a laser through them.
It sounds pretty easy. Like we can order a laser off eBay and I can get photos of hot young people and we'll just see if it works. How hard can it be? So what happened with this? Well, he claims that due to his experiments on organism rejuvenation, the Russian health ministry gave him authorization to bump this up and he started practicing with microwaves. And I've got some images of where this went, but you might think, well, hang on, this guy was in China. He was Chinese. What happened? Well, during the Cultural Revolution, he was anti-communist. He didn't like the Communist Party. He didn't fall in line with what they wanted. So
They struggle sessioned him.
Yeah, he was labeled as a dissident, an enemy of the state. He had to flee, so he fled to the USSR in 1971 and started...
Take his laser with him?
Yeah, well, he did more than that. See, the Russians started to give this guy funding. And he started to build crazy shit like this.
What the hell is that? That is so cool.
There's this giant dodecahedron with spikes on it. It looks like some kind of Katamari Damacy ball on steroids that opens up that you can climb inside. You got to look at the image.
It's like an anti-aging device that Madonna would use. That's what that is.
Put this one in the show notes because, yeah, this was one of his, I think, final designs and several prototypes as well.
He looks quite happy with himself, doesn't he?
I mean, he's like, yeah. I create a machine that make you a young boy.
But yeah, what is it supposed to do?
That's clearly evidenced by the schematics on the next slide right here.
What the?
I think we can all just take a look at that and it's self-evident. Anyone with eyeballs can figure that out.
So I'm assuming that you sit at number 4 and then you're blasted by number 3.
Number 4.
And number 6 is someone who's in their 20s who's been pinned down.
Maybe it's like a Chinese menu. Like you pick a number before you get in there.
Oh, number 2.
Number 2 make you a young boy. Number 4 make you a young girl.
You want to be woman? Okay.
This is so awful. And that's one of the prototypes that the Russians funded for him years earlier. I don't know if he looks younger or older in that photo, though.
He doesn't look as smug in that one. Maybe that one didn't work.
Yeah. So, yeah, Dr. Chang started working in Russia. He did all this work on barley seeds. There's all these testimonials from the director of the Agricultural Research Institute. So in the end, he started working mainly with their agricultural departments. But of course, I mean, the Soviet Union was falling apart, obviously. It was in complete shambles. Nothing was really operating. So you got to think, this kind of thinking existed in a bubble outside of the influence of Western science.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is breakaway civilization stuff, potentially.
Yeah.
Like, if he got it to work.
And it makes you wonder, like, yeah, maybe none of it really worked and there was a lot of fraud going on. But you would think that after this many decades, even the Soviets were great scientists. I mean,
yeah, they were. Yep.
They had some incredible scientific achievements. You would think they would be able to spot something that's a fraud.
Well, the thing as well is that the Soviet scientists, because they were cut off from the rest of the world, really, they were cut off from things like the developments of antibiotics is a good example, right? So they went another way. They went and used bacteriophage.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
They approached things from a different way. They just went, oh, well, we can't get access to that information, or they try to steal it, but obviously because it was a Cold War. So what they did is they improvised and they looked at science from a different way. And as much as it's a horrible, terrible regime, their scientists were like, well, we have to, come up with other innovations.
Well, I just started to wonder what this guy would have been capable of if he had a better environment for his research.
And the backing of, the actual scientific industry.
If he had a stable, stable funding, like a stable environment to do his research and other competent people to help him without
that delicious turducken would have been created.
Without a crumbling state surrounding his research, I wonder what would have taken place.
Well, the other thing that it makes me wonder as well is that because you've got this crumbling state, has this knowledge actually been lost? Has it been lost?
Well, obviously it hasn't been lost because you can go to the website.
Well, I don't mean that. I mean like actual legitimate research that's being conducted into it. We're not paying £800.
We just got to wait 6 months for your Hitler photo to come back with your wave matrix, slap on a pair of headphones, and you could be, you'll probably turn into a young German man.
Who's angry about his art career.
You just quit the podcast and start painting. Just goes horribly wrong.
I get kicked out of some Vienna art school, decide to take my, retribution amongst society.
The political landscape of Australia is just transformed
changes.
Forever.
Yep, I get into power and they just take over.
Can I be on your right-hand side? Can I be on the right-hand side of evil?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, of course. Can't do this myself.
So at the end of this article, the author here, Roger Meacock, says, look, in terms of credibility, for most people, the ability to use their baby photo to capture their DNA information sounds totally far-fetched. Duh. But Dr. Gariev was attacked by fellow academics despite the fact that since 2011, when he started offering this service publicly, many people have written testimonials in relation to their recovery. He said it is a great loss to humanity that Gariev unexpectedly died in November of 2020 with barely a mention in any of the scientific or national press of his work or his passing. So the question is, once again, is it real?
Yeah.
Is there anything to this? The fact that there were guys in the Soviet Union and in Russia doing this for decades.
Well, yeah, it's real in the sense that they were looking into it.
Getting the funding to build awesome-looking giant machines to transfer this energy information. You got to think something was going on, like something measurable was going on with this stuff. It can't have all just been pure quackery, right?
No, exactly. It can't have been. Like because you need to have progress for them to continue throwing money at things.
Well, I realize that there's still individuals in Russia that are following this research, and I found one of their websites today. It's over at wavegenetic.ru. Aura Torsion fields. This is the official site for linguistic wave genetics. And they sell, well, I don't know if they sell, but they have write-ups on some of this information. Torsion fields and wave genetic conferences are happening in the...
Charging paintings with the help of torsion fields?
Yeah, let's click on that. Let's check that out. Good one. This is the technology of charging printed images that's been developed using torsion fields.
To contain healing information.
Oh, he's got that weird pyramid headphone amplifier device.
So is that device used to charge? But this is what I'm talking about, right? This is the idea that certain art forms, you bring them into your home, you bring them into your life. What's it actually, aside from just visually looking at something, is there an ideology? Is there an energy behind it which is not healthy for you? And, there's all these stories from a paranormal perspective of people being like, they bring home a painting from an old castle and it's all of a sudden you've got poltergeist activity in your home.
Yeah,
because
great
it's got
point.
like a spirit trapped inside it.
Well, I think there's energy behind everything.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And there's a non-physical side to everything that has physical existence, especially things that are alive, from what we would term alive. And yeah, some of these devices supposedly tap into these fields and manipulate them. I like this one at the top here. I call this the Whitley Strieber 5000. Look at it, man.
I call it the dilator.
Man, he would just start sweating as soon as he saw it. Like, oh, boy. It's funny, if you go, look at this crazy chart. There's this insane chart with like the horoscope signs and weird triangles everywhere. But look at the name in the top left. Can you read that out for us? Can you see that?
Oh, David Icke.
It says David. Why does it say David Icke on this chart? And scroll down, and there's the Anatoly Pavlenko Ekimov torsion generator. Let's click on that. Let's have a look. What's this one about?
Hope he doesn't use it. Oh, that's the little headphone amp.
You information about so-called chemo generator. The generator produce right torsion field, but not only right, but the device can produce left and right torsion field.
Left and right torsion field. Okay.
You can see the device consists of box and cone.
That's literally all it is. The device is box and cone. Anything else, Professor? No, niet. Just box and cone. You can pay extra for 2 box, 2 cone.
Switch on, cone. Has a shape that this cone has a right torsion field on the top of this cone, and I will show this really use so-called fusion and.
What's he holding in his hand?
He's got some weird little whip in his hand that he's spinning.
So he's touching the torsion field, and apparently that's making the metal spin.
To use it in scientific research. And this.
Let's skip ahead. What else has he got in here?
Does he hold it up against something?
Has he got any freaking lasers? What's this thing? Some weird box with knobs on it.
We are going to show you how generator of AKIMO, torsion field, work. Now.
Oh, he's holding this device over the top of the other cone device.
Near the top of the cone, we can see the needle move right. But I try to put needle on the 0, but it is impossible because needle
wow.
Move.
How much vodka did this guy drink before this experiment? Makes me realize I actually found a video of their lab earlier that where they were doing some of these experiments. Yeah. Let's take a listen. So this is the main scientist behind it, Yevlenko.
What is he doing? Is that a taser?
This is the transfer from the man on the right, who's to. So there he's receiving the energy.
There's not enough face palms in the world for that. It's just.
And did you see that they managed to take some of this material and they developed a device that they attached to a motor vehicle?
No.
You haven't seen this one?
No, I haven't.
So this is like one of those old Soviet cars
Yeah.
that they've attached this device to.
Like a lot of Niev or something.
And as you can see, due to the genetic wave information, it has either gone into the past or the future.
Depending on which way the torsion field was going.
Probably going back to the 1950s to rescue that Chinese guy.
Probably.
So we can clearly see that there's something going on with this. But jokes aside, there is something that I realized at the end of this. There's a great, really long presentation on all this technology. And it's very well thought out, very well researched, but very heavy on the physics and the mathematics and the individuals behind this. It's a presentation by Ulrich Granuger, and it's called Future Science, the Wave Genome. And I realized that where his research was going towards the end of his career, they started to discover that they didn't need lasers anymore. They didn't need that kind of energetic device to produce an effect.
So what do they use now?
Language. Let's take a listen.
If there is a real resonance between DNA and human language, it should be possible to modulate DNA by language alone. And I'm afraid this has already been done, and the implications are powerful. In a frightening and yet groundbreaking set of experiments, the Gayayev group has used human language signals to initiate gene modification and expression. Curiously, this situation was forecast hundreds of years ago if we read the Kabbalistic literature about the golem, the construction of an artificial intelligence that also had a genetic body put together by a corrupted form of language. It imitated a human, but did not have the higher attributes of a human soul. Even older are the Gnostic teachings, such as the Pistis Sophia, that describe how archons, or off-planetary intelligence, are responsible for the industrious production of genetic material that is molded to resemble Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, his name itself a corruption of the original power of creation in Yah Sabaoth.
Stealing the youthful essence of a bunch of models by sitting in some weird Madonna tank, I buy. That I'm willing to entertain. But then when you start crossing into archons and language, I'm just like...
But all of it's related. Think about the work from Dean Radin, his parapsychology studies, where it was revealed time and time again that for the effect to take hold, there had to be belief.
Yes, that's true.
Whoever was involved in the experiment had to have some kind of belief for any tangible effect to really manifest. And so I said earlier that this is similar to magic, and it absolutely is. And this is why a lot of this stuff can't be replicated, because there's something about the intent and the consciousness of the practitioner that
and the
is crucial to the outcome of the experiments. And I think she made a really great point there, because we are crossing over with mysticism. This is crossing over into the side of, as she said, the Kabbalah and earlier sources, which is why it all starts to sound so demonic in the end, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And when you think about it, though, like, what has always been the point of propaganda? It's controlling the way that people think, right? And propaganda is using language. And this is why, right in the world we're living in right now, why censorship is so strong and why people are so hell-bent on controlling speech. Like, in this new term, like hate speech, people are hell-bent on controlling speech because it's about power. But when you start crossing into this kind of stuff, like, does it actually start crossing into more metaphysical elements? That it's like, it really is about manifesting control over others.
Well, there is something to that. There is some power behind that. If you control language, you control thought.
Yes.
And this is tied into all of this. And so just something to ponder. It's difficult to accept a lot of this. Like, obviously, it's easier to laugh at it and make fun of it, which we've done. It's hilarious, the idea that you can beam a laser at a hot photo and make yourself younger. It just sounds so silly. But on the other hand, there has been some real history of scientific progress following this different way of thinking.
Yes.
And it also feels impossible just to throw it all away. There's something to this. I'm not quite sure.
It's the nuance.
Yeah, there's something to this. And I don't know if we live in a world that has the ability to make new discoveries like this anymore. I think that we're set in our ways, and the scientific establishment is well established.
Well, it's corrupt.
It's not going anywhere. It's driven by money. It's driven by other nefarious interests.
Yeah, you know
so
what,
things like this aren't going to break through.
Well, maybe not. But then you hear, like, if you look through history, it's like Copernicus, for example, or, people that were, even Da Vinci, that were outliers. Like, they were coming up with wild ideas, but they were correct.
Copernicus, Da Vinci, Tesla, S-Rob. They all come to mind.
Maybe not so much S-Rob.
S-Rob, the occultist author, is a professional. He's written more books on the occult than anyone else in the English language. I'm reading from his website here, srob.co.uk. You can still buy magic spells from S-Rob. See up on the menu here? And there are some classics that may...
Bigger breasts, breast-growing booby magic.
I don't want to get booted off YouTube. That is the sexy naked person sex attraction magic spell, still available. There's also the bigger breast-growing boob magic spell, $5.99. There's the
hang on, is that $599 or $5.99?
no, just $5.
See, they're cheaper than getting your DNA blasted or getting your photograph scanned.
S-Rob is not a greedy man. He is not a greedy man.
No, he wants to bring sexy, naked attraction personness to everyone.
There was a penis enlargement one which had a lot of reviews, but I can't see it anymore. I swear I was reading it earlier. Hair growth, baldness one, clever intelligence, magical spell cast. Do you want IQ spell? And he's got an Asian guy. That's hilarious. Clever intelligence, magic spellcaster. Do what you want IQ. We all want that kind of IQ, don't we?
Sure.
Don't we, Aaron?
Yep.
Powerful intelligence boosting magic spell cast. Very powerful boost to your intelligence will be seen for full effect to leave your name and date of birth. Let's check out the reviews. Einstein, 5 stars. I wanted to be excellent on every subject at school, event, or anywhere where learning takes place. I wanted to be like Mr. Fantastic and Batman combined.
I want to pass in my matrix. What is it? Matrix exam.
Speak into the microphone when you talk.
Oh, I'm very weak in math. I don't know how to solve any problem. 5 stars. Okay.
And I realized that the good S. Rob, he has his YouTube channel link up the top here. And I was checking out some of his latest, and here's the video I was talking about. Supernatural being told me while writing Snake Demons from Hell, which is his latest book, by the way.
But told him what?
Well, exactly. What a weird video title. It's like a question and a statement all rolled into one. Let's take a listen.
Well, I'm going to talk about something very weird now. I'm doing it the early hours of the morning, so it's like technically 3 days ago, okay? 3 days ago, when I was writing the book, Snake Demons from Hell, which I know that's a sensational name, I was contacted by a supernatural being. Now, the thing is with this is, it gave me proof of its existence. Okay, I'll explain that a little bit further on. But it said we are the demons, us humans. And what it also said was that we have limited limitations, and the reason you can't advance because of the limitations, but a being will come from us that is all powerful, and we will be its ancestors. That's what it said.
Are you getting all this?
No.
The human beings are the demons, and a being will come that is our ancient ancestors?
Okay.
The word Wu-Tang can be the best Wu-Tang you can be.
The best Wu-Tang?
Yeah, he keeps mentioning Wu-Tang. I wasn't sure what he was saying. Wu-Tangy? I thought he was saying, no, he's saying Wu-Tang, like the Wu-Tang clan.
Wu-Tang, it said to me. Now, the thing is, that's the proof, because Wu-Tang is Chinese. I don't know what the hell Chinese is. I'm not really good at foreign languages. You know, I do English. Although I'm an author, I just do English. And Wu-Tang, I had to find somebody Chinese. And Wu-Tang is linked with the word Wudang, which is a Wudang mountain, which is a spot for Taoism. The weird thing with this is people probably know...
Taoism?
Yeah.
Maybe the ascended master Moses, who in actual fact was a guy that made himself into an Egyptian emperor. I'm trying to think of
And he's just like...
An Egyptian, emperor.
Where is he? Why is he wearing sunglasses? Is he just come out of a nightclub? What is going on?
The nightclub in the background.
now. And overall, it's my 708th book.
708th.
From history. You know, some people call me master. I never tell them to, but they do anyway. Okay. And that's, I just want to help you all out. Okay, thanks a lot. Okay.
Thanks, S. Rob.
Right, I'll give you a quick look at
See you later, mate.
Should we have a quick look around?
Yeah, give us a quick look, mate.
Okay, bye-bye.
The streets are empty.
He just turns around to an empty street
are empty.
in the middle of England somewhere. Let's check out his books. What else has he been doing?
What is that?
Oh, you're going to get us banned, this, Rob. I like this one. This is occult cryptozoology for summoning dangerous cryptids. I actually own this one.
Good. Have you used
bought it today.
No, great. You should use it.
There's a Bigfoot spell.
You don't want Bigfoot hanging around.
Yeah, you have to follow his instructions and you can summon Bigfoot. But at various points, he says you got to check around to see if Bigfoot has already arrived. This is a key part of the spell because you don't want to continue summoning more Bigfoots.
Yeah,
you
one's enough.
It's like Mr. Meeseeks. You have them just replicating everywhere.
Obviously, it's a rather lucrative job for him because he's out at his nightclubs, these stylish nightclubs.
This is my favorite. Goblin Love Magic. 72 pages. I think that's his 703rd
What's in
book.
the book? So is it just rambling
It's
like
just shit.
Yeah.
It's just the same thing repeated over and
Give
over
him a thumbs up, though. I saw he's only got 13 likes, so the poor guy.
Yeah. Go to S-Rob's site and leave a review on one of his spells. We'll link to it in the show notes at mysteriousuniverse.org. While you're there, sign up for Plus, mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. Sign up today. You get access to the big extensions we do on these shows every single Friday. Plus members also get an exclusive show that comes out every single Tuesday as well. You're getting more than double the content if you sign up for Plus. Plus members also get a totally ad-free version of the show, a higher quality MP3 for our audio version. And if you sign up for MU Max, you get access to our massive back catalog as well. It's all on the website, mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. $9 a month. Help support your favorite show. Sign up today. What's coming up in the Plus extension?
We're going to be going into extraterrestrial mining operations, the UFO supercharging network across Western Virginia, and also the siphoning of uranium from certain mines by alleged UFOs. And I say alleged because we're not entirely sure they are UFOs, but all that stuff is coming up in our Plus extension very soon.
Looking forward to that. That's a wrap for this free edition of MU. Thanks for listening. If you're on Plus, stick around for the great stuff after the break. For everyone else, we'll catch you next week.